this is related to the specific heat of crystalline solids. Okay, so this is an important problem which actually, in some sense, through the theory of Einstein's specific heat theory, was the first quantum theory of solids. Okay, now of course you know solid state physics, everything is quantum mechanical, but this was kind of the first quantum mechanical calculation of a solid state. So, but before that, we will try to understand a little bit of background in which this was looked at. So, I try to sketch some details. So, I am interested in talking about specific heat of crystalline solids. Are you able to see? So, so I just reproduced some paragraph from one of the review articles. Okay, so this Dulong-Petit law, as you might have seen in some textbooks, so this was a result of two French experimentalists, Pierre Dulong and Alexis Petit. And in 1819, they made a very unexpected discovery while they were working in thermometry, that almost for a dozen metals and sulfur, all specific heat is measured at room temperature. They found that the specific heat per gram atom, basically this is what we call as molar specific heat these days, specific heat per mole, that's what it means, had practically the same value, approximately 6 calories per mole degree. This is what is called Dulong-Petit in 1890. They did, of course, not regard this as a mere coincidence. One is allowed to infer from this data the following law. The atoms of all simple bodies in their meaning elements have exactly same heat capacity. Now you have to also a little bit look at this law in a context where the atomic theory was not known at that time. People did not know whether the atoms existed or matter is continuous. So such things are not known. So during those days, there was a result like this, which says that the atomic theory, so this in some sense is like an indication that there probably are atoms, or the matter is made up of atoms. And they did not restrict this statement to elements in solid form, but they believed that initially, if you do a careful experiment, improve your experiments, this law might also hold for gases. But later, I think by 1830, there were many people who tried to show that this law at best can be applied only to solids. So, so two things that we can take from here. Okay, so first thing is that the molar specific heat. So in the modern language, we call it as molar specific heat. Which is defined as specific heat per mole. Okay, that is actually of the order of 6 calorie per mole degree. So this is what they observed. And two things. One is it is same for all elements. Very powerful statement. And second thing is, of course, they did not make this statement, but all the experiments in Dulong-Petit's case, they are done at room temperature. Okay, so experiments at room temperature. Okay, so this is what I am trying to describe here is the Dulong-Petit work in 1890. Now, subsequently, during those times, the atomic numbers, okay, atomic numbers are what you call as atomic weights of elements. Remember, this was even before the periodic table was given by Mendeleev. The atomic weights of elements are generally unknown for many elements. Unknown. So, Dulong-Petit had suggested that their result can be used to determine this Dulong-Petit law, and for maybe several decades, this was used as a technique to determine the atomic weight. Okay, so the first Avogadro had done an experiment on carbon, and he first observed that this carbon, the molar specific heat value is deviating from the universal value which Dulong and Petit had shown. But his experiments were not very precise, and hence people did not give too much of importance to that. But he was the first person who at least hinted that there may be some exceptions to this Dulong and Petit relation. And in 1840, there were two people called Rivet and Marcet. They carefully did this experiment with the diamond and found that instead of 6, diamond is showing only 1.4. This is a marked deviation. See, carbon is one of the elements in the periodic table, and it shows such a less molar specific heat value, whereas Dulong-Petit value is 6. And this experiment was a similar experiment was repeated by Regnault in a year later, and then he finds that the C is equal to 1.8. So there is a difference between these two results itself, and the two results are obtained, and both of them are exhibiting a marked difference between the value of the Dulong-Petit. And then following 1840 and kind of another 30 years or so, Regnault does a series of experiments, and then finds some other elements also which have a deviation from the Dulong-Petit value. And so there is nothing except that people are trying to accumulate data. There is nothing spectacular that happened. And so we go back to 1870s. So there's Weber, who in 1872 tried to take the experiment of Rivet and Marcet and then Regnault, and then he asked the question, why did they get different results? And then he looked at their experiments carefully and then realized that the experiment of Rivet and Marcet has been conducted in the range of 3 degrees centigrade to 14 degrees centigrade, and Regnault, the experiment has been conducted in the range of 8 degrees to 98 degrees centigrade. So At this point, Weber has made a very bold suggestion, kind of a very innovative idea that I think 1.4, so which is correct? 1.4 is correct or 1.8 is correct? So he suggested that both results, can be correct, if the specific heat, okay, if the molar specific heat, okay, so let me call it as simply C is a function of temperature, because this is at a different temperature and this is at a different temperature. Now this knowledge is so common. I mean, even when you do experiments in calorimetry in your first year BSc or something like that, you know that if you change the temperature, you will have different specific heat. But this was the first such idea which Weber proposed, that if you want, because he did not find any problem with both the experiments. Both the experiments were very thought of and well controlled experiments. So there is no reason to believe that one result is wrong and the other result is right. So both have to be right. And you see how a particular good experiment can give rise to a kind of a new idea. This is somewhat similar to a good experimental data which Tycho Brahe has collected meticulously about the positions of the planets, have made Kepler to deviate from the centuries-old belief that the orbits have to be spherical and then come to elliptical orbits around. Something similar to that, if the experiments are good and if the experiments are done carefully, then that gives rise to new physics. So here Weber has concluded that the specific heat should be a function of temperature. It is not same at all temperatures. And then once he came to that conclusion, in 1872 itself, he did experiment of specific heat of carbon between 0 degrees centigrade to 200 degrees centigrade. So then he found that specific heat varies by a factor 3. That means specific heat at 200 degrees centigrade will be 3 times the specific heat at 0 degrees centigrade. So there is a variation by a factor 3, and by the time it looks like summer happened in Europe, and you don't get ice because you have to depend on snow for the ice. So he could not continue his experiments, and then his next publication was in 1875, where he conducted experiments of specific heat of carbon, mainly diamond, from minus 100 degrees centigrade to 1000 degrees centigrade. And in this region, C varies by a factor 15. That means the specific heat at 1000 degrees centigrade is 15 times the specific heat at minus 100 degrees centigrade. And with these experiments, he has demonstrated the picture that you see in this in many of the textbooks these days, that the temperature versus the molar specific heat. So you see a picture like this. Okay, so this picture is due to Weber. So from his experiments, this kind of a picture is drawn, and he also explained what is the meaning of this Dulong-Petit's law. He found that so he also conducted these experiments for diamond at high temperatures, And then he found that this particular value 6 is coming at high temperature. So then he realized that Dulong-Petit's law is valid for all materials at high temperature. So the specific heat for any material will I think yeah, I think it just got switched up. So I'm starting it again. Okay, can you see it now? Hello, can you see it? Okay. So this is so Dulong-Petit law is a kind of a high temperature behavior of all the materials. So that is something like, it's not like diamond, it does not satisfy or anything. Every material may have certain temperature at which Dulong-Petit law is valid. So in the modern language, so this is what established by the results of Weber. Okay, so I think we have to. This is the experimental background of the specific heat as a function of temperature, and so the theory was first attempted by Ludwig Boltzmann. So in 1871, Boltzmann so his work actually derived the specific heat for. So I'm going to do this calculation by using the statistical mechanics that we have developed. So we have what is called a crystalline solid. And we have to model this one, and we model this crystalline solid as a spring block model. So what is this? That is, let's say you have an atom, and then there is a bond of this atom with a neighboring atom, and there is a bond, and there is another bond, another bond, another bond. Okay, so I'm not drawing all of them. Okay, so these bonds are like springs, and atoms are like blocks. Okay, so this is called a spring block model. So this is called a spring block model, and of course I have just done a two-dimensional one. It is extended into third dimension also in the same way. Now you can see that if there are so we can say that the solid. So what happens is that when you heat this solid, there will be some vibrations of these atoms, and these vibrations are communicated to each other through these oscillations of these springs. Okay, so now you can say that for the purpose of vibrations, Now the solid can be simply represented as a collection of let's say Pn harmonic oscillators. Of course, you have to understand that these are in general coupled harmonic oscillators, because these springs are like suppose if I excite this spring and this excitation will communicate to all other springs, so they are coupled harmonic oscillators. But we already know that when you have a coupled system of oscillators, one can always choose a set of coordinates where this coupling can be removed. That means you can have a decoupled set of harmonic oscillators. This is something like what you did in small oscillations chapter in classical mechanics. You can always write down in terms of normal modes, normal coordinates, the oscillators are uncoupled in those coordinates. So let us say that let Qi I is equal to 1 to 3n be a set of normal coordinates. And set of Pi I equal to 1 to 3n are corresponding canonical moment. I'm not worried how to do this. If you have learnt it in small oscillations, it is fine. Otherwise, such a thing is always possible. You can always find normal coordinates and then the corresponding canonical momentum. Now what we can do, what is the advantage of this one? The advantage of this one is you can write down. So in terms of normal coordinates, so in terms of normal coordinates, we have Cn uncoupled oscillators, uncoupled harmonic oscillator. This is the advantage. Okay, and in general, you will have each coordinate will be associated with a normal mode frequency. Each coordinate is called a normal mode, correct? The normal coordinates are also called normal modes, and each normal mode will have its own frequency. Now, this is where Boltzmann made an assumption that all coordinates vibrate with same frequency. Which is usually not a very nice assumption. But in this particular case, Boltzmann said that let's assume this, and he definitely believed that this is definitely a good assumption for high temperature. For high temperature, definitely this is a good assumption. So once you make this assumption, then we are ready to write down the Hamiltonian of the system. So Q bar and P bar is equal to sum over I is equal to 1 to 3n Pi square by 2m, which is the kinetic energy, plus half m omega square Qi square. Now remember, omega is same for all. Otherwise, I have to write omega I Qi square. But this assumption says that omega is same. So this is the Hamiltonian, and I have written them as sum of 3n oscillators. This is essentially sum over I is equal to 1 to 3n. Okay, so harmonic oscillator ith harmonic oscillator, and sum over r. This is what you can write if the harmonic oscillators are uncoupled. If they are coupled, then we will not be able to write like this, because there will be terms involving Qi, Qj, and so on. And so, but in terms of normal coordinates, you can always write them to be uncoupled in this fashion. So we are ready now to do statistical mechanics. So I wanted to bring this. This is the graph. Okay, so anyway, let me come to this graph later. Okay. So now once you have this thing, so we are ready to do statistical mechanics. So what is that we have to do? We have to calculate the entropy. For calculating the entropy, so we have to find the sigma for microstate given by E, V, and N. Okay, so EVN is the macrostate. This is the number of microstates, and we have to find this. And this guy, I have sigma of EVN is equal to 1 by h power 3n into integral. Of course, there is a constraint on the integration, dq bar dt bar, and the constraint is h of q bar t bar less than or equal to. Okay, so this is how we have to do this. And so let us try to look at this Hamiltonian carefully. And so let me define some psi I is equal to Pi by root 2n. Okay, suppose if I define like this and define, so let's say let psi I is equal to this, and eta I is equal to square root of m omega square by 2 into Qa. Okay, then what happens to this Hamiltonian in terms of this psi bar comma eta bar will be equal to sum over I is equal to 1 to 3n psi I square plus eta I square. Is that correct? Now let me say that I'm going to define. Okay, I'm going to define. I must know what is the. Okay, so let me call it as some xi. Xi is equal to psi I for 1 less than or equal to I less than or equal to 3n. And this is equal to eta I for 3n plus 1 less than or equal to I less than or equal to 6n. Suppose if I do like that, then I can write this Hamiltonian in terms of one vector, a 6n dimensional vector, which is simply I is equal to 1 to 6n xi square. Okay, I'm just renaming these variables. You will quickly understand why am I doing this. So this particular thing will give me the following. So if I have dpi is equal to square root of 2m into d psi I. Okay. Similarly, dqi is equal to square root of 2 by m omega square into d eta I. So please look at this carefully. So I'm going to write this as 1 by h power 3n into, there are 3n q's. Okay. And because of that, I have 2 by m omega square into 3n by, to the power 3n by 2. Into, I have 2m to the power 3n by 2. That is coming from here. Into integral, I can simply now write it as dx bar, such that sum over I is equal to 1 to 6n, xi square is less than or equal to, or let me write it in this fashion in a suggestive manner. Now look at this. This is so this is equal to 1 by h power 3n into, I have 4m. Okay, this m will cancel because there is m here and there is m here. So 4 by omega square to the power 3n by 2 into, recognize this is volume of 6n dimensional sphere. Volume of 6n dimensional sphere. Now this is something which we have already seen earlier. Okay, so you can recall that volume of n-dimensional sphere, which we have done it when we did our calculation of ideal gas. So n-dimensional sphere, we have that is root pi to the power n divided by gamma of n by 2 plus 1 into r to the power n. N-dimensional sphere of radius r. So this is the formula which we have derived. And so what is the radius here of radius? Square root of e. That is the radius here. So now you can see that we have everything done already. So I can write this sigma as a function of AVN is equal to 1 over h to the 3n. Okay, so this is 2 square and this is omega square. So the squares I can write it as 2 by omega to the power 3n. And the volume of this one is root pi to the power 6n. So this is 6n dimensional sphere divided by gamma of 6n by 2 plus 1 into root E to the power 6n.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, please go to last two steps. I lost my connection.
Last two steps.
Yes, sir.
Is this one? So essentially what I'm trying to say is that by this redefinition of the variables, I will be able to come to conclusion that this integral is just a volume of 6n dimensional sphere of radius E, and we have already found out a general expression for volume of an n dimensional sphere of radius R, and I'm going to substitute here radius is root E. Okay, so that is that fine?
Nice. Okay, sir.
So now you can write this this one. So I'm going to write this as 1 by h. So let us write all three n's together. So you have 2 root pi to the 6n. It is pi to the power 3n. So you have 2 pi by omega into e. Okay, into e. This whole thing raised to the power 3n, and what I have here is 1 by 3n factorial. Thus, it is 3n plus 1. Gamma of 3n plus 1 is 3n factorial. Now, notice that so I want you to recognize that this is, if you can remember your harmonic oscillator quantum mechanics. If I write this 2 pi, bring it to the denominator, so I can write this as E divided by h by 2 pi into omega to the power 3n into 1 by 3n factorial. This h by 2 pi in quantum mechanics, you call it as h cross omega. But remember that when I wrote down this h, I did not have any quantum mechanics in mind. But it turns out that this is somewhat related to the quanta of the energy. So you can see that this E is the total energy of the system. E by h cross omega. What this, if h cross omega is something like a quanta of energy, this simply tells you this is the number of quanta. Okay? So the number of microstates is related to the number of quanta raised to the power the number of the oscillators into 1 by 3n factorial. So this is our okay, whatever is the interpretation, this is our result, and now we are ready to look at thermodynamics. So what is thermodynamics? Thermodynamics, we will our aim is to, of course, get the entropy. So entropy is equal to KB logarithm of sigma. So I can write this as KB into 3n logarithm of E minus 3n logarithm of h cross omega. Okay, so minus logarithm of 3n factorial. 3 times n factorial. Okay, so now what is our aim? Our aim is to calculate the specific heat so that we can see what result we get. So we use this relation That is 1 over T is equal to the partial derivative of S with respect to E. This is a thermodynamic definition of entropy. So that implies that this 1 over T is equal to, so you see this is the only term where E is there, other terms does not contain E. So I have 3n kb divided by E. So this gives you that this E is equal to 3n kb into Q. Okay, so this is the total energy or the internal energy of the system, and the specific heat at constant volume is given by the partial derivative of E with respect to, which is simply 3n kb. Now use the correspondence which we have obtained in ideal gas, namely the Avogadro number times the Boltzmann constant is equal to the gas constant. So you can write this one as 3 times number of moles into Avogadro number into kb. So if you use this, recognize that this is R, and molar specific heat is given by CV divided by N, which is the specific heat per mole, and that is simply 3 times R. Now this 3 times R is what gives you a numerical value of 6 calorie per mole per kg. So it is almost about 50 years after the Dulong-Petit had observed this constant specific heat, which is an independent value with respect to temperature. Boltzmann had derived that the specific heat as a function of temperature. It is independent of temperature. And of course, from the Weber's experiment, it is clear that this is not valid for some material and not valid for other materials. For all materials, this turns out to be kind of high temperature behavior. And essentially, Boltzmann's assumption of having the frequency to be same is actually a high temperature scenario, and this is the first application of statistical mechanics in the theory of specific heats. So this is essentially the Dulong-Petit. So this is Dulong-Petit law, which was just a formulation based on the experiment, was derived by Ludwig Boltzmann by using a model of spring block system, a color harmonic oscillators. But Boltzmann had also derived, he also proved something called an equipartition theorem, which we will do it later. But according to equipartition theorem, Boltzmann argued that if you have every degree of freedom, you will have a share of half kT of thermal energy. And according to that, you can immediately see that there are 6n degrees of freedom, and hence you have an energy of 3n kT. And once you have energy of 3n kBT, you have a specific heat of 3n K, which means it is a molar specific heat of 3 times R. So this was something which is consistent with the equipartition theorem that Boltzmann had argued. But sometimes when people asked Boltzmann that what about diamond, because you know from experiment, so when Boltzmann did this, Weber's experiments were not known, but because that is to come later after 4 or 5 years, But Boltzmann was definitely knowing the results of Ray, Marset, and Regnault, and so people asked him, "What about those experiments?" Then Boltzmann made some remark that so when asked about dV by N for diamond, Boltzmann said some degrees of freedom are sticking together. Even though this looks a very funny and somewhat not a very scientific kind of a thing, but this was considered to be a very serious explanation those days. Boltzmann said that in those materials, some degrees of freedom are sticking together. They are not freely excited. And this kind of explanation he offered. And of course, it was not rigorous and it was not even, could not be even put mathematically. But this is something which was there in the literature for next 30 years or 40 years. So people believe that there is some kind of sticking together is taking place. Okay, so we have okay. So now, so there was not much progress till in terms of this, except that people keep doing experiments and there are more and more results of specific heat with different materials showing some kind of deviation from the Dulong-Petit law, and Weber's experiments established that there is a temperature dependence of the specific heat. Okay, so the next work that we try to look at in this fashion is the work by Albert Einstein. Einstein's work, as I told you, was the first kind of a quantum work. This was done in 1907 on specific heat of solids. Now this graph that I have been pushing down from the beginning of the lecture is the graph from the Einstein's paper. So Einstein published several papers, but in all the papers that he published in his entire career, I think there are only two graphs. Not in one paper. In all the papers of his life, there are only two graphs. So this is one such graph. So when someone who publishes only two graphs in his entire career, I think the graph has to be viewed seriously. So other publications are only mathematical, only expressions, etc., etc. But this is one of the graphs that he in his published paper contains. Okay, so Einstein's work is something like this. So Einstein in 1905 he showed that to explain, he understood that the radiation itself consists of quanta, and then in 1900 Planck had shown that when there is a thermal radiation, the radiation can be understood as radiation from the dipole oscillators, so harmonic oscillators. So Einstein believed that specific heat also should have this quantum matrix. So Einstein's model is something like this. You have same spring block model, but each harmonic oscillator is instead of continuously taking any energy that it wants, it can only take energy in terms of discrete quantum. So if you have, let's say, if E is the total energy, okay, so then you can say that E by h nu. Okay, so this could be, I define this as some n. This is number of units, which you call it as quanta. Okay, so this is E by h nu, which is number of units of energy. Now, so the problem which Einstein had at his disposal is that you have to now find out in how many ways can m quanta be distributed among Pn oscillators. And this number of ways, is what gives you your omega as a function of E. Okay, so if you can find this omega, then you will be able to write down the entropy and then calculate the specificity. So it is this question, which of course even before Einstein, Planck had asked one such question in the context of black body radiation, and so it is like this. So, for example, to get some insight, to get some idea about this, let's say that I have some 3 quanta, and let's say some 3 oscillators. Okay, so I'm taking these numbers because it is amenable for counting direction. So I can imagine something like that. So let us say that I draw some 2 lines like this. So this is like one oscillator, this is like other oscillator, and this is like third oscillator. So 3 quanta. So one possible way is that let me imagine these circles are quanta. So I give all the 3 quanta to the first oscillator, give nothing here, nothing here. This is one way of distributing. Another way of distributing is maybe I will give 2 quanta here and I give 1 quanta here and no quanta here. Another way is I give 1 quanta, and 1 quanta. So these are 3 different ways. Now the question is, how many such ways are there? So you can see this is to get this number of ways. What I am doing is I am just sliding these sticks. I mean, basically these partitions. Correct? So sliding these partitions in such a way that this can be distributed in different fashions. So that means you can see that if there are 3 oscillators, there are 2 such sticks here. Okay, so that means totally there are how many objects? There are 5 objects. Okay, so the question boils down to in how many ways can I choose these 2 partitions among 5 objects? Correct? In how many ways can I choose 2 partitions among 5 objects? Now this is something which is easy for me to, because it is like what we did earlier. So I have 5 objects. So 5, 3, 2. In these many ways I can choose. Okay. So we can do this in 5C2 ways. Now let me generalize this one, because the general situation is that if you have n number of particles, if I have n number of particles, then there will be n minus 1 partitions. Correct? So now, so in general, there are 3n minus 1 partitions, because there are 3n oscillators. Partitions have to be chosen from how many objects? How objects are 3 3n plus m minus 1. From these objects, I have to choose these many partitions. Then I will get my omega as a function of m, and let's say n is equal to 3n plus m minus 1 factorial divided by 3n minus 1 factorial into m factorial. This is the binomial coefficient, which is same as what we write it as 3n plus m minus 1 c 3n minus 1. Okay, so this is my m, and also remember this m is related to energy. M is equal to E by h. Okay. So now let me say that this n comma m are very large. They are of the order of Avogadro number, very large, and as a result, So what I'm trying to say at this point is that since n and m are very large, I can simply neglect this one. And I use Stirling's approximation to write down the entropy as 3n plus. So I use Stirling's approximation in this, and then substitute this m. M is nothing but E by h nu. I substitute that here, and then I calculate 1 by t equal to partial derivative of dou s with respect to E. Then I have some simplification. So I get energy as a function of temperature as this expression. Now I want to examine what happens to this expression in the high temperature limit. If kBT is much greater than h nu, then h nu by kBT is a small number. It's very small compared to 1. So I can expand this and then neglect higher order terms. And if I substitute it here, then I will have h nu will cancel 3 by. This was the Boltzmann's result, or this was the result of Dulong-Petit law. So I am able to recover what classical theory had, what Boltzmann has done from this theory in the high temperature limit. Now, after examining this, I am trying to calculate the specific heat, which is a partial derivative of E with respect to T. So I am doing this differentiation using chain rule, and so here there is 1 kb sitting in the denominator. So I am multiplying this kb and dividing by kb so that I can write this as h nu by kbt whole square. And in this limit, when h nu is much larger than kbt, I can neglect this one, and hence this can be written with a definition of theta e as h nu by kb. This expression Cv by n is equal to this. So this graph, what I have been trying to push down in the beginning, is the Einstein's theory, this expression of 1907, compared with the Weber's experimental point, experiment done by Weber in 1875 for diamond. Specific heat per mole on the y-axis and T by theta e, Einstein temperature, on the x-axis. So this is, as I told you, one of the graphs that Einstein's, one of the 2 graphs of Einstein's Curies publications. Now I made several remarks. So one of the remark I made was that in Boltzmann's case, Boltzmann assumed that the frequency of vibrations are same for all degrees of freedom. Einstein also continued with this assumption, but he made some clarification. If you have 3n coordinates, in general they may have 3n normal mode frequencies. So he says you must take the frequency of oscillator that you are considering as the average frequency. And he said this average frequency can be obtained from experiments. How it can be obtained from experiments? Because since we are defining Einstein temperature as h nu by kb, from the experiment we can determine this theta e, and from that, since h and kb are fundamental constants, we can find out mu. So this was the kind of a suggestion to determine the theta e, or the mu. Now, the second remark I made was that if you remember your quantum mechanics, harmonic oscillator has got something called 0-point energy, and when Einstein did this calculation, 0-point energy was not known, and hence this model does not contain 0-point energy. But 0-point energy is not important for specific heat, because 0-point energy is only required if you want to calculate the total energy. Specific heat is anyway a derivative of the total energy with temperature. In that case, 0-point energy does not contribute anything. And the third remark I made is that if you look at the books like R.K. Patriya, they follow something like this. So you have, let's say, one harmonic oscillator, that is single degree of freedom. You have this Hamiltonian, and suppose if you fix the energy to be E, you can write down this as q square divided by 2e by m omega square under root whole square, p square by square root of 2me whole square equal to 1. This is the equation of an ellipse in the phase space, like this. And suppose if you are trying to find out the area of the ellipse, which is pi AB, A and B are given here, so it has something like this. Suppose if I divide this phase space into cells, of area H, then the number of cells is given by E by H cross omega. This is exactly like now if you have 3n oscillators, the number of cells will be E by H cross omega raised to the power 3n, but then the total energy in this particular case is given to all the 3n oscillators, whereas here we assume that total energy is given to only this oscillator, and hence there is an overcounting involved here, and hence I have to divide this by 1 by 3n factorial. So this, I have argued it and obtained this expression, and I wanted to tell you that this expression is same as the expression that we have obtained by doing this integration in this particular function. So this is a simple argument to obtain the same expression. Okay, so that is the third of my remarks. And the fourth remark is that a specific heat, which is a temperature independent specific heat followed by an exponential decrease in specific heat. So this is what Dulong-Petit's result says, and this is Einstein's result. But at very low temperature, this is supposed to go to zero very fast, but then it turns out that at very low temperature, it goes to zero in a much slower fashion. And in fact, the specific heat for crystalline solids, it goes like T cube. And hence this part could not be explained by using Einstein theory. And there is another theory called the Debye theory of specific heat. We will do this theory when we do quantum statistical mechanics, and that is what gives you this T cube. So I am trying to compare this behavior of specific heat for general crystalline solids to the two-level systems that we have taken yesterday. In two-level systems, we have this Schottky anomaly. Specific heat here, usually specific heat will increase and then saturate. Here it increases and then decreases. So this is anomalous, and so this is Schottky anomaly. And if you ask whether two-level systems are the only systems which shows this, it in general shows for any finite level system. So the only difference is finite or infinite. So for any finite level system, sometimes the calculations can become very cumbersome. But you will see that this Schottky-like anomaly in the specific heat is a characteristic feature of finite level system. So these are the remarks that I have made, and more or less what I wanted to cover under this topic is done. So if you have some questions, I'm sorry I forgot to keep my mobile very near to me today, so I could not even hear the sound because I'm keeping this earphones. So any question? I will share the notes immediately, so you can try to go through, and if you have some questions, we can discuss again in the next class. Okay, so I just wanted to make one remark with respect to one of the questions Abhijit asked last time with respect to ideal gas. I don't know if some of you may recall the question. The question is that density should be same? Is it required? So now I understand that if the densities are different, then the mixing is not a reversible process, because suppose in one chamber you have high density, and when the mixing is taking place, when you put back the partition, it is not possible to get the same density as before, and therefore the density of both the gases should be same is a requirement for the mixing process to be reversible, and that is the reason why that Na by Va equal to Nb by Vb equal to Na plus Nb by Vb. The condition is put for getting what is called the Gibbs paradox.
understood, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can you explain how that H you have taken earlier comes out to be Planck's constant later?
Actually, there is nothing like what I have taken earlier comes to be Planck's constant later, because what I have taken in the initial calculation is there is no reincarnation or something here. So what happens is, so in this calculation, if you see this particular H, okay, is not a Planck's constant. It is some H, which so here there is no Planck's constant. So this is some H. Okay, this is not a Planck's constant. But now what I'm trying to say is that if I go and do this calculation and get this expression, okay, so I am writing it like this, but I have no reason to believe that this is a Planck's constant. This is some H class, right? This is some H, and this I will call this as H class. Okay. So, but what happens is when we do this calculation with respect to this problem, this is so this is Planck's constant, correct? This is Planck's constant because here I'm using quanta. So this is Planck's constant, and so if I go and do this calculation, so up to this, so you have, so here I have this expression. Maybe I think I should go back to.
Sir, is this the same thing that it will account for the smallest cell size that we can choose?
Smaller scale?
Smallest cell size.
Yes. Yeah. That's true. So it turns out that, so what I'm trying to say is that if you, suppose if you have a phase space, and then your phase space has to be divided into cells, okay? That you cannot have access to information beyond this resolution. So let's say this is Q and P, and this is essentially your H. Okay, and this is what Boltzmann called coarse graining, and what Heisenberg calls uncertainty. Or I think, I don't know if you can remember this calculation by Sommerfeld. Sommerfeld did the calculation like this, exactly like what I showed here. That your if you take a phase space QP, first let's say Planck considered harmonic oscillators. So this is Planck. So let's say you have an ellipse. Okay, so now the area is now the area is given by, just like what we did earlier, E by mu. Okay, that 2 pi I'm just using 2 pi by omega, I'm writing it as mu. So E by mu, this is what you get, right? Now suppose if you say that this is one particular value of energy, let's say I have E1, okay, then let's say I have E2. E2 is another energy. Now you can say that this area cannot be small. I mean, it cannot be zero. There is some kind of an irreducible area, and let's say then you have some E2. So you can in general say that E2 by mu minus E1 by mu is equal to H. It has to be, so you cannot squeeze it beyond this. Okay, so there's some kind of irreducible area. So this will give you this Planck's quantization. En is equal to some n h mu. Okay, so this is how Sommerfeld argued that Planck's quantization can be understood. And one of the success of Sommerfeld is that he also looked at Bohr's quantization. So Bohr's quantization is something like this. Bohr's rule says that there are stationary orbits for which the angular momentum is equal to nh by 2. Correct? This is Bohr's quantization. So now imagine that you have got some kind of an object making a circular motion. Okay, if an object is making circular motion, so you can call this theta is your generalized coordinate in this case, and the generalized momentum is going to be L, correct? And angular momentum is conserved, and hence if you look at the phase space of this one, let's say this is your theta, and this is your L, and since angular momentum is conserved, if you start from let's say minus pi to plus pi, and your angular momentum is conserved, so it is constant for all values of theta. Now, if you look at the area of this one, so let's say this is some value L1. So this is going to be L1 times 2 pi, and that is also same. This is the irreducible area; it cannot be smaller than this. So L1 should be equal to h by 2. Okay. So this irreducible area in the phase space, or in some sense, you call this as quantum mechanics implies there is a lower limit on what is called action. So if you do this, then in one shot, both Planck's quantization and Bohr's quantization is a consequence. So this is something which is well known in quantum mechanics. Once quantum mechanics idea is there, so you can see that Boltzmann's idea has coincided with this idea, which came much later. But whether Boltzmann had any idea of quantum mechanics is debatable. But so why did he choose this coarse graining as a thing? Is I believe is probably coming from the use of probability, because probability is usually a measure theoretic notion, and you require some, suppose probability for a point on any continuous space is 0. If you want to define probability, you should define some set or some flush should be there for the point for the probability to be non-zero. So I believe that Boltzmann probably introduced this coarse graining only to justify the use of probability, but it was more than probably coincidental that it turns out that that totally agrees with the ideas of quantum systems later.
Sir?
Yeah.
Sir, in case of the Sommerfeld model, the orbits happens to be closed. Like the electron is bound to the system, isn't it? It is orbiting in a, and it is also periodic.
No, I'm only talking about Bohr's model here, where it is a circle. So are you talking about this or you're asking another question?
I'm talking about the Sommerfeld model. In Sommerfeld model, are those orbits are like are the particle moving in a periodic motion?
Uh, yeah, you have period of oscillations. This just like what we have in Kepler's orbits.
Okay, sir. So then the phase when you have drawn the phase diagram for L and theta, you told that okay, L should be a constant value over all values of theta.
Hmm.
Shouldn't it be closed like a phase-space diagram? Shouldn't be closed one?
So see, it is not. It is not that this is. I have theta value going from minus pi to plus pi. It has a constant angular momentum. That is enough for me, right?
Okay, sir.
Minus pi to plus pi. In the configuration, it is closed.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Again, sir, if you increase more, then it will come back to zero again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Okay. So I think if there are no other questions, we can close it.
Sir,
Yeah.
so can you explain the part where you did that m quantity of distribution among different among three n oscillators?
Monthly and oscillators.
So two objects and five partitions something.
Mhm. So, so here I am giving this example of three quanta and three oscillators. So this is oscillator 1, and this is oscillator 2, and this is oscillator 3. So what I am saying is that by putting two partitions, I will be able to get three oscillators. Now I can distribute these three like this. This is one way. This is another way. Two quanta are given to first oscillator, one to second oscillator, and nothing to third oscillator. Or in this case, one to each oscillator. This is just some representative cases, but there can be several other cases. Now you ask the question, how many cases are there? I'm not interested in individual cases, but how many cases are there? And you can get those cases, it is like just by sliding these partitions among these objects. Okay, and it is like I have slide this partition from here to here to get this. And then I slide it from here to here, and then this one from here to here to get this. So by sliding these partitions, so this question is asking how many ways can I choose two partitions? Two partitions are these two sticks among five objects. Why five? These are three plus these are plus two. So that can be done in 5 CT ways. So we are going to ask a general question that if you have 3n oscillators, there will be 3n minus 1 partitions. Now they have to be chosen in 3n plus m minus 1. That is 3n minus 1 plus m. So it is same as totally 3n minus 1, 3n plus m minus 1 divided c 3n minus 1. So this is the expression to write down the total number of ways in which m quanta can be distributed among 3n oscillators. Kushindar, is that okay?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can close. If there are no questions.
Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, you just calculated how many ways can M quantas be distributed among 3n oscillators. So, how is this equivalent to calculate the number of microstates of the system?
So basically, what do we mean by number of microstates? Number of microstates is how many ways this energy can be distributed among the different oscillators, right?
Among the different oscillators,
Yeah.
I think we should think like among different particles. If we are in classical.
Yeah. So that is fine. So, but what actually this model tells you is that the different particles are vibrating, and the vibration is governed by these harmonic oscillators. That is how we started, no? In our spring block model, we started with so in the spring block model here, started with there are different atoms, and these atoms I am going to consider this for the excitation purpose, a collection of 3n coupled harmonic oscillators. Then I choose normal coordinates. That means it becomes uncoupled, and then I wrote down the Hamiltonian, right? So this is basically the energy is given to only atom, but the atom, when it moves, it will also excite these vibrational degrees of freedom, and that is what we are following. But one thing that you have to notice between what we did in ideal gas and here is that in ideal gas, what we have done is we asked a question in how many ways these particles are arranged in the space. That is, if you have a volume V, in how many ways the particles can be arranged in this volume V. Here we are not doing like that because it is a crystalline solid and particles are going to sit in their mean positions. They are only vibrating. So the vibrations can be captured by the harmonic oscillator like Hamiltonian. And that is the reason why we don't ask what happens to the configuration of these particles in space. They are not going to, for thermal excitation purpose, the configuration is going to be the same. Crystal is going to remain the crystal. If the crystal is not going to remain the crystal, that means we are heating it too much, then it is melting. Okay, so we are not asking the question on the specific heat at that high temperature. We want to retain solid as a solid and then ask a question what happens to specific heat as a function of temperature. Ashutosh, is it okay?
Okay, sir. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Shruti, then we will close.